More than 2 years after Michael Jackson's death and after a 23-day trial, Los Angeles jury convicted Dr. Conrad Murray of involuntary manslaughter last night. It took the jury of 7 men and 5 women 9 hours to reach their verdict. And with us this morning to discuss the result of Michael Jackson's trial is close friend of the singer and cosmetic surgeon Patrick Treacy. And on the line from London is showbiz reporter Paul Martin. But to discuss the verdict in detail, let's take a look at the moment when the jury announced their verdict.
Superior Court of California, Los Angeles County. The people of the state of California plaintiff versus Conrad Robert Murray, defendant. Case number SA073164. Title of court and cause. We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter in violation of Penal Code Section 192, subsection B. Alleged victim, Michael Joseph Jackson. Alleged date of June 25th, 2009.
Paul Martin, we are joined on the line by him now. Paul, we heard the shriek of joy there from LaToya, and we saw the fans outside, their reaction. They feel there somehow justice has been found for Michael, that he's been vindicated somehow.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the fans feel a big sense of justice from this. Of course, nothing will ever bring Michael Jackson back to them or his family, but certainly I think the feeling has been since the day Michael Jackson died, only a week before his big comeback run of 50 concerts in London. I think the feeling has been that somebody had to pay the price for essentially a healthy 50-year-old man meeting a very untimely and unseemly end. And I think for the fans, there is an element of closure here, although in my mind there are still a number of people who should be brought to justice over this. But of course it will never happen.
So Paul, do you think that Murray was a bit of a scapegoat?
I don't think he was a scapegoat. I mean, look, Sinead, I watched every night of this trial. I found a compelling viewing, not just because I'm a Michael Jackson fan, but just from the whole showbiz point of view. It was a real spectacle. But I have to say, in all the nights that I've watched it, I didn't see even, never mind one day, I didn't see even 1 hour that really went in Conrad Murray's favour. He was acting against everything that profession, completely outside the boundaries of medical professions, and he broke so many rules on so many levels. And I think the thing that really got to me and most of the Michael Jackson fans was when Michael Jackson needed him most, which was actually when he was in cardiac arrest, to not ring 911 for over half an hour is absolutely abhorrent and unreal. And I think for that and that alone, he deserves the sentence which he's received. And I think he needed to pay the price. But I do think we need to be realistic about this and look at the wider picture. There were people pushing Michael Jackson very, very hard at the time. There were people happily paying and hiring Conrad Murray for Michael Jackson for their own selfish interests, i.e. to get him through these concerts in London. And those kind of people, I think, have a lot to answer for, but they won't answer for these actions in the courtroom the way Conrad Murray did.
What does this mean, Paul, now for his legacy and for the family? What happens now?
I think for his legacy, look, I mean, there's another Michael Jackson album out, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. I think there's a lot of people making money out of Michael Jackson and his death. I think his legacy is assured as probably the greatest entertainer of all time, and has been really since the day he died. Michael Jackson's suffered a massive career peak in death, so I think that's already assured. What I do think is that it kind of shows, because of the very intricate court details we've seen, it also showed that Michael Jackson was excited about the comeback. He did feel that he could go through with the tour. He did want to make the comeback. It wasn't motivated by financial problems. So I think from that point of view, it shows fans and people who maybe have been a bit sceptical about Michael that actually he was mentally in a reasonably good place in terms of live performances coming up to those shows before he died.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us on the line this morning. That's Paul Martin, showbiz reporter and editor of the Sunday Mirror. We're
also joined by Dr. Patrick Treacy. Good morning, Patrick. I just want to establish your professional credentials with regard to this, because we know that you were a friend of his as well. But you were also his physician in Ireland.
That's right.
And you were on the list of witnesses, a supplementary list of witnesses. So there was you were on standby to actually be called for this trial, although that didn't happen subsequently.
Sure.
When you were first approached to be his physician, I'm assuming you would have looked at a medical file, or you would have given him a checkup, or you would have got some idea of what state and shape he was in. So how was he physically, as far as you were concerned, as his doctor?
That's a very interesting question, because I suppose there is a fine line where you can, I suppose, cross into what is, I suppose, what you're treating your patient for. And certainly in terms of confidentiality, I've always sort of stood by this. But I suppose it's out there now that Michael had vitiligo, for instance. It's out there that he had obviously scarring on his head. It's out there that he had lupus, you know, so I wouldn't, you know, sort of break any confidences regarding this or the treatment. And it's in the public domain, it's in the public interest.
These are actually cosmetic things in one sense, Patrick.
Sure, but I suppose I seen him from both a dermatology point of view and rebuilding his face, the same as Arlen Klein was, and myself and Arlen, you know, sort of communicated with each other as to, you know, sort of what is best for him. But even in terms of when I met Michael first, Michael was quite shy, and Michael would be sitting, you know, sort of in the surgery reading through books and that. And I remember one time him opening up one of the dermatology texts I have. It's about 300 or 400 pages long, and he came along a picture of a black African child with vitiligo, and he turned around and he says to me, nobody can understand the pain and the mental anguish that child is going through. And that's before he even showed me himself that he, you know, his body was both black and white, you know, and even though his face was white, it was as a consequence, I suppose, of hydroquinone and some sort of depigmentation creams. But I would have known, you know, sort of long before a lot of people that he suffered from this condition. And it was horrendous to think that people, you know, in the media particularly, were making him seem like he wanted to change his race or his colour. And
what about his issues with, I mean, one of the things that has come through in the court cases is that he suffered from some very severe insomnia. Now, were you aware of that when you were treating him?
I was never aware of that, and I certainly would have known Michael here for 7 months, and even when he came back to the United States, I never wrote him a script for a sleeping tablet in my life. Because
one of the things, if you've seen this, This Is It, you know, he's painfully thin in it, but he certainly didn't seem to be suffering from any deficiencies of energy. And I mean, if you're going through that kind of rigorous rehearsal schedule, you want your wits and your fitness and your stamina about you. Absolutely. So the idea that he would be not getting proper sleep, not getting proper rest, and still be able to do that, doesn't kind of gel.
It doesn't really, and something I think happened between the time he left Ireland and the period that sort of he went under the care of Conrad Murray, because certainly during the period that Michael was in Ireland, I never seen him with any drugs. I never wrote any sort of prescriptions for any drugs for him.
Well, actually, just Patrick, when you saw those photographs of the list, the array and range of drugs that were in his house, I mean, were you personally and professionally horrified by that?
Absolutely. Like I mean, I was in Michael's house, and at no time did I ever see any drugs anywhere. And certainly, you know, the way he interacted with his children and everything, you would know that there was no sort of dependency problems, at least at that stage anyway. But I'm not naive to think, and I gave an interview in New York some time ago before the trial, that, you know, something else may have happened to him, or somebody could have taken over his care and given him certain things. But certainly during the period that I...
Did he ever mention propofol when he was under your care?
Well, I suppose I'm on record saying this. On at least 2 occasions now during procedures, we also gave him propofol, but only with the presence of an anaesthetist being there, and he absolutely always, you know, sort of demanded that. I remember
he specifically requested the propofol?
No, but he, I suppose, did recognise it. It's a very common sedative during procedures, and
administered in a hospital theatre situation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, but with an anaesthetist, somebody is able to, I suppose, reverse apnea if it occurs. But I seen on one occasion before he was meeting the Queen in Casino Royale, and he was very, very uptight about meeting the Queen, and, you know, sort of this was bothering him quite a lot. And during the same time as the World Music Awards, you know, sort of in November 14th, 15th, 2006. And before that period, you know, he was very, very uptight, and he wanted a certain sort of, you know, procedure done that I was willing to do, but I couldn't get an anaesthetist at that time to do it. I myself, I suppose, could have given him midazolam reversed with an exit. You know, it's a procedure we've done many times, and he wouldn't even do that, you know, without an anaesthetist being present. And, you know, sort of as a consequence of the procedure, I must say it did hurt him, and he was willing to take the pain rather than sort of, you know, do it in the absence of an anaesthetist. So to go from that sort of, you know, situation to seeing somebody that was using, you know, sort of gallons of propofol just to get to sleep, to me it was bizarre, you know, sort of in the ultimate. I must say I was shocked.
A complete abdication of Conrad Murray's professional responsibilities.
Oh, absolutely. I think, sort of really reckless behaviour from the point of view of using a drug like propofol, Diprovan, outside a hospital scenario, to not monitor the patient, to even have, just a little pulse oximeter, which I believe was in another room, sort of no IV apparatus set up all over the sort of drug. And even, I must say, it was appalling to see an IV bag cut open, a hole made in a propofol bottle, and and it just stuck into a drip. I mean, the sterility factor in that alone is horrendous.
So what's your take on Conrad Murray then? Was he just a cowboy out to make as much money out of Michael as he could, or was he someone who got lost in the whole hoopla of a star demanding what he needed to make him sleep?
I think it's probably a mixture of both, Sinead, and I don't mind going on record for that. I would think that he certainly, as the DDA Walgren said, became an employee rather than a doctor. And somewhere along the line, I think he did lose his professional integrity and possibly may have even done what Michael Jackson, requested of him to do. Now, there's a subplot running through all this that sort of, that verges on one side on conspiracy theory and obviously on the other side, and it may be the truth. There's a lot of people would benefit from the fact that Michael Jackson would have died. We were well aware of that. There's a lot of people also would benefit from the fact that if Conrad Murray was not found guilty, I mean, there's a lot of insurance payouts, sort of by Sony. And we're not naive enough for a moment to believe that if Michael Jackson was seen to be complicit in his own death, or if he commits suicide, then certain insurance payouts would be a different way. Now, I would be party to a little bit of knowledge regarding that, so I don't want to sort of, at this point in time, sort of say much more.
You don't think for 1 second that Michael Jackson was suicidal?
Not at all, not for 1 second, not at all. I mean, he loved his kids and he'd have no reason. But who pays who would certainly be totally different if it was assumed that he had committed suicide, that sort of thing.
But you don't believe for 1 second that he administered that propofol himself, as
No,
Murray's team were claiming?
I was in a programme in New York with the Discovery Channel where, as much as proved he couldn't do it, but the judge had sort of banned the jurors seeing that. The way that propofol works is very interesting. Propofol has no antidote, okay? Whereas something like midazolam or lorazepam or any of the benzodiazepines do have an antidote. And why is it popular? If I was to sort of lay 10 patients wall to wall and give them a shot of propofol and walk down the ward, by the time I reach the bottom, the first ones would be waking up. It only lasts about 4 minutes. And that's why anaesthetists all over the world, sort of totally like it. Now, the thing is that if you want to have somebody put to sleep on it, you have to run an induction maintenance dose.
Patrick, I'm going to be rude and cut across there because we have to leave it. But just finally, I suppose, you knew him and you cared for him. He was a friend of yours. So this is ultimately a tragedy at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely ultimate tragedy. And I think, sort of the guilty verdict was the right one in this instance. And as I've seen some of the fans last night, that signs up guilty as undercharged, and probably that's where we should leave it.
Patrick Treacy, thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Now, we'll take the news here, Siobhan Bastable.